What if the prayers you were taught were only half the story? Imagine for a moment that the most profound invocation, a key to unlocking the divine within, was not lost to the sands of time, but intentionally erased, buried not because it was heresy, but because it was a truth so powerful, so liberating, that it threatened to dismantle the very foundations of control. This wasn't a prayer of supplication, a plea sent to a distant God in the heavens. It was a vibrational formula, a sacred technology of consciousness that revealed the kingdom of heaven was not a place to be earned after death, but a state of being to be accessed in an instant. A revelation so potent that entire empires were built upon its silence. And for 2,000 years, humanity has been searching for a connection that was never truly lost, only hidden from view. This is the story of that forgotten legacy, a truth that has been whispering through the ages, waiting for those with ears to hear. Travel back in your mind's eye, beyond the stone walls of cathedrals and the gilded pages of authorized texts. See the sun-scorched earth of Galilee, feel the cool night air of the desert where mysteries were shared not in grand sermons, but in hushed tones among a trusted inner circle. Here, the one they called the Great Initiator offered two paths of knowledge. For the masses, there were parables, beautiful stories that planted seeds of morality and hope. But for the initiates, for those who had proven their readiness, there was the gnosis, the direct, unfiltered knowledge of reality. He taught that the spark of God, the indivisible and eternal monad, was not an external creator to be worshipped, but the very essence of their own being, and he gave them a key, a fourth prayer, designed not to ask for intervention, but to trigger a profound and instantaneous remembrance of this innate divinity. This sacred knowledge was a fire, and those who sought to build a new world order knew that a fire, uncontrolled, could burn down the structures they were so carefully erecting. As the spiritual movement was forged into an institution, a great and terrible editing began. Councils convened in halls of power, not just to unify belief, but to select which truths would serve the empire and which would be cast into the darkness. An army of scribes, under the watchful eye of the new architects of control, rewrote the narrative. Scrolls were burned, teachings were altered, and a direct, personal path to the divine was declared a forbidden road. A God in the heart of every man and woman was a liability, a God enthroned in the heavens, accessible only through a sanctioned hierarchy, was an instrument of power. The prayer of becoming was replaced with a prayer of begging, and the sovereign soul was taught to kneel. Yet a truth so fundamental cannot be destroyed. It can only be buried. It survived in the coded language of alchemists, in the secret rites of mystery schools that went underground, and in the oral traditions of persecuted lineages who carried the flame in silence. It slept in clay jars beneath the Egyptian sands, a time capsule of ancestral wisdom waiting for a future generation to unearth it. And perhaps you have felt its echo throughout your life, that persistent, quiet feeling that something vital is missing from the stories we have been told, a sense of a forgotten power, a memory just beyond the veil of consciousness. What if your presence here, at this very moment, is not a coincidence, but an answer to a call your own soul has been sending out across time? What if you are part of the generation destined to reclaim this lost knowledge? The journey we are about to embark upon is more than a historical investigation. It is an act of spiritual archaeology. We will dig beneath the layers of dogma and fear to uncover a truth that belongs to all of humanity. This is an invitation to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. It is a path to reclaiming your divine inheritance, not as a gift from an outside source, but as a birthright that has been waiting patiently within you. If you feel the resonance of this ancient call stirring in your spirit, if you believe that the deepest truths are the ones we find inside ourselves, then your journey of awakening has truly begun. Subscribe to this channel and join us as we walk this path of revelation together. For the veil is thinning, and what was hidden is now being brought into the light. To understand the depth of this hidden mystery, we must first step out of the familiar corridors of accepted history and into the vibrant, chaotic, and spiritually fertile ground of the first centuries. This was not a time of a single, unified faith, but a crucible of profound spiritual inquiry. Picture the world not as it is written in the victor's texts, but as it truly was. A landscape alive with countless streams of thought, each seeking the source of the divine. In the sun-drenched lands of the Levant and the ancient mystical sands of Egypt, the teachings of the one called the Initiator were not a monolith, but a living, breathing spectrum of wisdom. For the crowds that gathered in the open air, there were parables, beautiful, accessible stories that planted seeds of compassion and hope. But in the quiet of the evening, for the inner circle of disciples who had proven their readiness for a deeper truth, there was the gnosis, the direct, unfiltered, and often shocking revelation of humanity's true nature. It was in these sacred private moments that the distinction was made clear. The masses were taught to look to a Father in heaven, an external source of power and salvation. This was a necessary and gentle introduction to the divine. But the initiates were guided to look within, to the kingdom of heaven that resides not in the sky, but in the silent chamber of the human heart. Here, the initiator was not a savior to be worshipped, but a master of spiritual mechanics, a guide who offered the keys to unlock the divinity that was already dormant within them. He spoke of the monad, the indivisible, eternal, and singular spark of God from which all souls originate. He taught that they were not fallen creatures in need of rescue, but fragments of the divine source on a journey of remembrance. And to accelerate this remembrance, he bestowed upon them a sacred technology, a vibrational formula that we now call the fourth prayer. It was not a plea for help, but an activation of being. But a truth so radically empowering carries its own shadow, the fear it inspires in those who seek to build systems of control. As the raw, untamed spiritual movement that followed the initiator began to crystallize into an institution, a new power emerged. It was not a single person, but a collective consciousness, a systemic force that we might call the architects of control. These were men of vision and ambition who saw the potential for a unified global religion that could stabilize empires and govern the souls of millions. They understood that a wild river of individual spiritual experience could not be controlled, but if that river were channeled into a single man-made aqueduct, its power could be directed. For their grand design to succeed, the faith had to be uniform, predictable, and hierarchical. It needed a God who was distant and a populace that was dependent on an official priesthood to bridge that distance. This necessity for control reached its apex in the 4th century, in halls of cold marble, where the future of spirituality was debated and decided not just by mystics, but by politicians and emperors. At the Council of Nicaea and the councils that followed, a great and terrible editing of reality took place. This was not merely an effort to organize scripture, it was a calculated act of spiritual curation and suppression. Guided by a political agenda, a small selection of gospels was canonized, while a vast library of ancestral wisdom was deemed heretical and cast into the flames. Texts that spoke of the divine feminine, of reincarnation, and most dangerously of the God within, were systematically hunted down and erased from the official narrative. The direct, personal path to the divine was declared a forbidden road, and those who walked it were branded as heretics. The knowledge of the monad was replaced with the doctrine of original sin, and the prayer of becoming was rewritten as a prayer of begging. Why would such a beautiful and empowering truth be so feared? The reason is simple and absolute. The revelation of the fourth prayer, the knowledge that any human being can instantly access the divine source within, is the ultimate threat to any system built on spiritual authority. If the kingdom of heaven is an internal state of consciousness, the gatekeepers who stand at the doors of stone cathedrals lose their purpose. If the connection to God is direct and unmediated, the entire structure of priests, rituals, and sacraments becomes not a necessary bridge, but an optional tool. The fourth prayer grants sovereignty to the soul, and a sovereign soul cannot be ruled, controlled, or told that it is unworthy. By hiding this knowledge, the architects of this new religious empire created a spiritual dependency that has echoed through the centuries, shaping a civilization that has been conditioned to look for its power, its worth, and its salvation everywhere but where it has always been, inside. Yet a truth this fundamental cannot be truly destroyed. It can only be buried, where it sleeps like a seed in the dark earth, waiting for the right conditions to grow once more. This forbidden legacy did not vanish. It was encoded in the coded language of alchemists who spoke of turning the lead of the ego into the gold of the divine self. It was preserved in the secret rites of mystery schools that were forced underground, their teachings whispered in candlelit rooms. It was carried in the oral traditions of persecuted Gnostic and mystic lineages, passed from master to student in an unbroken chain of silence and reverence. This ancient wisdom became a hidden stream flowing beneath the surface of official history, a legacy of light preserved for a future time when humanity would be ready to reclaim what was taken from it. And does this ancient conflict not resonate with a quiet, persistent feeling you have carried your entire life? That sense that something vital is missing from the stories we have been told. That feeling of a forgotten power, a memory of wholeness that flickers just beyond the reach of your conscious mind. What if that feeling is not your imagination, but an echo of this very truth? An ancestral memory, encoded in your own spirit, reminding you that you are more than you have been taught to believe. What changes when you begin to consider that the spiritual longing you feel is not for a distant God, but for the remembrance of the God that sleeps within you? This is the conflict that was set in motion 2,000 years ago, and its resolution is the journey we are on right now. The question is no longer whether this knowledge was hidden, but whether you are ready to be part of its revelation. The architects of control believed their victory was absolute. They had burned the scrolls, exiled the sages, and rewritten the very words of the divine to build an empire of the spirit. They had constructed a fortress of dogma with high walls designed to keep humanity in and the gnosis out. But they made one critical error. They believed that a truth could be killed by destroying the paper it was written on. They did not understand that a truth of this magnitude is not an idea, but a living frequency. It cannot be erased, only displaced. And in 1945, in the dry, patient earth of Upper Egypt, a peasant's shovel struck something that was not stone. It was the sound of a forgotten legacy cracking open its tomb. A large clay jar, sealed with bitumen, held not gold or jewels, but a treasure infinitely more valuable, a library of 13 leather-bound codices, a collection of ancient scriptures that had slept in silence since the 4th century, waiting for the world to be ready for their revelation. This discovery at Nag Hammadi was not an accident. It was an act of cosmic timing. It was the physical unearthing that mirrored a spiritual awakening that was beginning to stir across the planet. For the first time in 1600 years, the world could read the words that the councils had condemned. Here were Gospels bearing the names of Philip, of Mary Magdalene, and most profoundly, of Thomas. And what did these forbidden pages say? They did not speak of a distant, judgmental God enthroned in the heavens. They spoke of an inner light, a divine spark that was the birthright of every soul. The Gospel of Thomas, a collection of the initiator's raw, unfiltered sayings, declared it plainly, "The kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth and people do not see it. And again, split a piece of wood and I am there. Lift a stone and you will find me there." This was not the language of a religion seeking followers, but of a master revealing to his students the omnipresence of the divine source, a source accessible not through blind faith, but through direct inner knowing. But these scrolls, as potent as they are only the physical shadow of a much larger body of wisdom. The most protected knowledge was never entrusted to ink and papyrus, which could be burned by the hands of empire. The deepest truths, the vibrational mechanics of the fourth prayer, were passed down through a far more resilient medium, the unbroken chain of oral tradition. Imagine secret gatherings in desert caves, lit by a single oil lamp, where a master would transmit the gnosis not through words alone, but through presence, through frequency, through the silence between the words. This ancient wisdom survived in the hushed tones of persecuted lineages who guarded the flame of truth through the darkest of ages. They became the living libraries, their bodies the vessels, and their memories the sacred scrolls, ensuring that the legacy of the initiator would not be lost to the ashes of history. This is a truth that cannot be proven in a museum, for its evidence is not under glass, but lives in the quiet echoes that still resonate in the world's hidden spiritual currents. When a truth is too dangerous to be spoken aloud, it learns to hide in plain sight. This hidden knowledge was encoded in the symbolic language of those who came after, the mystics and alchemists who understood the inner science of the soul. They spoke of turning the lead of the profane, separate self into the gold of the illuminated divine being. Was this not the very purpose of the fourth prayer? To transmute the consciousness of separation into the golden consciousness of unity. They drew symbols like the Ouroboros, the serpent, consuming its own tail, a perfect metaphor for the monad, a singular, self-sustaining divine source with no beginning and no end, a reality the soul re-enters when it remembers its own nature. The cathedrals themselves, built by the very institutions that suppressed the truth, were often designed by guilds of masons who were heirs to this secret stream of knowledge, embedding sacred geometry and Gnostic symbols into the very stone, a silent testament to the truth sleeping just beneath the surface of the official story. This revelation of an inner divinity was not an isolated heresy, but a universal truth, a golden thread that runs through nearly every authentic spiritual tradition on earth. The sages of the Himalayas spoke of the unity of Atman, the individual soul, with Brahman, the universal source. The ancient Egyptian priests, in the Hermetic traditions from which so much of this wisdom flowed, taught the great principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. The initiator was not inventing a new truth. He was delivering a master key, a uniquely clear and powerful articulation of the one perennial philosophy that has been the foundation of all true awakening. The suppression of this teaching was therefore not just an attack on one spiritual path, but an attempt to sever humanity from its shared ancestral memory, to make us forget the one truth that unites all peoples, in all times, that the temple of the divine is not made of stone, but of a consciousness. Ultimately, the most profound proof of this lost truth is not found in a clay jar or an ancient symbol. It is found within you. It is the quiet, persistent feeling you have carried your entire life that something essential was missing from the stories you were told. It is that inexplicable longing for a home you have never seen, that flicker of a memory of a time when you knew, without question, that you were whole and connected to everything. This feeling is not a flaw or a fantasy. It is the evidence. It is the forgotten legacy itself, stirring in your spiritual DNA, calling you to remember. It is the resonance of the fourth prayer echoing across 2 millennia of silence, waiting for a listening heart to finally hear its call. The proofs are all around us and within us, but they mean nothing until they are recognized. And now that the evidence has been laid bare, a deeper question arises. What exactly is the mechanism of this prayer, and how was it designed to unlock the kingdom within so instantly? And so, the physical evidence lies before us, unearthed from the patient desert sands. The scrolls speak in a clear voice, a testament to a truth the architects of control tried to silence with fire and dogma. But the most profound proof of this forgotten legacy is not found in a clay jar or a forbidden gospel. It is found in the silent, resonant chamber of your own heart. It is a feeling you have known your entire life, a quiet ache of the soul that you may have mistaken for loneliness, for dissatisfaction, for an unnameable longing. It is the subtle, persistent hum of a memory just beyond the veil, the feeling of a spiritual homesickness for a place you cannot name but have never truly forgotten. What if this feeling is not a sign of your brokenness, but the last, defiant echo of your wholeness? This is the ancestral memory of the monad, the divine spark, calling to itself across the ages. It is the memory of a time before separation, before you were taught that God was a distant king on a faraway throne, and you were a subject, unworthy and small. The systems of control were masterful in their design. They built cathedrals of magnificent stone to draw your eyes upward, to make you feel insignificant in the face of such grandeur, to convince you that the divine was something external to be reached for, but never touched. They gave you rituals and intermediaries, beautiful and complex systems designed to manage your connection, ensuring that the power always remained in the hands of the few. They did everything they could to make you forget that the truest temple was never made of stone, but of consciousness, and that its high priest was your own awakened soul. What changes inside of you in this very moment when you begin to entertain the possibility that this deep inner longing is not a search for something you lack, but the pull of something you already are? This is not just a historical revelation. It is a fundamental reordering of your identity. You are not a fallen creature, born into sin and desperately seeking salvation from an outside source. You are a fragment of the divine source itself, a spark of the eternal fire, on a journey not of earning, but of remembering. The entire story you have been told about your origin, your nature, and your destiny was a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep you from realizing the power sleeping within you. The revelation of the fourth prayer is the key that unlocks that sleeping power, and in doing so, it does not just change your past, it redefines your entire future. Your purpose on this earth, then, is not what you have been led to believe. It is not a test to be passed, a trial to be endured in hopes of a reward in an afterlife. The true purpose, the great work, is the act of remembrance. It is to peel back the layers of conditioning, fear, and dogma that have been placed upon your spirit, and to allow the original light of your being, the light of the monad, to shine forth. This is the inner alchemy the mystics spoke of, turning the lead of the forgotten, separate ego into the pure gold of the unified divine self. The initiator did not come to save you from a fallen state. He came as a master of spiritual mechanics to remind you of your celestial origin and to give you the tools to consciously return to that state while still in this human form. This is why the tension begins to rise within you now, because this knowledge is not passive. It is not a comforting story to be consumed and then forgotten. It is an activation. To truly hear this truth is to be held accountable by it. It asks you to stop looking outside of yourself for answers, for validation, for permission to be powerful. It demands that you turn your gaze inward and face the incredible and perhaps terrifying reality of your own divinity. It is a call to reclaim your spiritual sovereignty, And this path is not for the faint of heart. It requires the courage to question everything you have been taught, to stand apart from the crowd that still seeks comfort in the old stories, and to walk the solitary path of the initiate, guided only by the light of your own awakening soul. Do you feel that shift? The mystery is no longer a historical puzzle to be solved, but a living, breathing reality unfolding within you. We move now from the why to the how. The ancient truth of the fourth prayer is not a simple string of words to be recited. Like a charm, words are merely the vessel, the outer shell. The prayer itself is a technology of consciousness, a specific vibrational formula designed to create a resonance, an attunement between your personal energy field and the infinite field of the divine source. It is a science of the soul, a precise method for dissolving the illusion of the ego and triggering an instantaneous experience of the unified state of being that the initiator called the kingdom of heaven. The architects of control hid the words, but they could not erase the frequency. That frequency has been echoing through the ages, waiting for a generation with the sensitivity to perceive it once more. It is a harmonic that can only be heard not with the ears, but with the spirit. It is the key that unlocks the gate, not to a place in the sky, but to the infinite dimension that exists within you. The evidence has been presented, the historical crime has been exposed, and the inner resonance has been awakened. The only question that remains is a profound one. Are you prepared to learn the mechanics of this sacred technology? Are you ready to move beyond belief and into direct experience? For the path forward leads into the very heart of the prayer itself, and the revelation it contains will change everything. We have followed the trail of whispers through the dust of forgotten history, piecing together the fragments of a truth that was intentionally shattered. We have seen the evidence in the clay, jars of Nag Hammadi, and heard its echo in the silence of persecuted sages. We have identified the crime and the motive, understanding why a truth of such profound empowerment had to be buried beneath the foundations of an empire. But we have arrived now at a precipice, a moment of revelation so fundamental that it will reframe everything we have explored. We have been searching for a lost prayer, assuming it was a sequence of words, a forgotten verse to be recited. But what if the secret was never in the words themselves? What if the greatest deception was not in erasing a text, but in hiding the very nature of what prayer truly is? This is the turning point. The moment the veil is not just lifted, but torn away completely. The fourth prayer was never a prayer of supplication. It was a prayer of declaration. It was not a plea sent outward from a state of lack, but a vibrational command issued inward from a state of knowing. For 2,000 years, humanity has been taught to pray on its knees, to look up to the heavens, to petition a distant and separate God for mercy, for intervention, for salvation. This is the prayer of the forgotten, the prayer of the disempowered. The fourth prayer, the great and terrible secret of the initiator, was the opposite. It was a technology for remembering, a formula for embodying, a method for activating the divine consciousness that was never separate from us in the first place. It does not ask, it acknowledges. It does not beg, it becomes. The consequences of this single shift in understanding are staggering, echoing through every cathedral, every temple, and every private moment of spiritual longing across the centuries. The greatest spiritual crime was not the burning of scrolls, but the re-engineering of the human connection to the divine. The architects of control took a tool of sovereign creation and convinced the world it was a tool of desperate appeal. They taught us to speak the language of separation so fluently that we forgot the native tongue of our own soul, the language of unity. Every prayer for help that went unanswered, every moment of feeling abandoned by a silent God, was not a failure of faith, but the consequence of using the wrong spiritual mechanic. We were given a key, but told it was merely an ornament, and so we have stood before a locked door for millennia, never realizing the power to open it was already in our hands. This hidden science of the soul was not lost entirely. It was encoded by those who knew the truth, hidden in plain sight within the symbolic language of the mystics. The alchemists of old spoke of the great work, the transmutation of base lead into pure gold. Was this a crude attempt at metallurgy, or was it a perfect metaphor for the mechanics of the fourth prayer? The lead is the dense consciousness of the ego, the feeling of being a separate, mortal and powerless self. The gold is the luminous, incorruptible consciousness of the monad, the awakened divine spark. The fourth prayer is the philosophical fire, the catalyst that initiates this profound inner transmutation, not over a lifetime of effort, but in a single, focused instant of remembrance. It is the science of turning the feeling of "I am lacking" into the reality of "I am." This revelation redefines the very mission of the one they called the initiator. He was not a religious founder seeking to build a new system of belief for the masses to follow. He was a master technician of consciousness, a spiritual scientist who had mapped the internal architecture of the human soul. He understood that humanity was suffering from a collective amnesia, having forgotten its divine origin. His parables were a gentle anesthetic for the public, but the fourth prayer was the targeted surgery for the initiates. It was the precise procedure to awaken the dormant memory of the monad, to restore the soul to its original factory settings of wholeness, power, and unity with the source. This is why his teaching was so dangerous. A religion can be controlled, but a science of awakening, once learned, makes the student their own master. And what does this mean for you? Right now, in this moment? It means that the deep, persistent spiritual ache you may have carried your entire life was not a sign of your imperfection. It was the phantom limb of your own forgotten divinity. It was the monad within you, calling out for recognition. It was the memory of your own sovereignty, stirring beneath layers of conditioning that told you that you were small, that you were separate, and that you needed an external power to be made whole. What if every prayer of desperation you have ever uttered, every plea sent into the void, was simply the inverted echo of a forgotten declaration of power? What if the universe was not waiting for you to beg, but for you to remember and to claim the reality you wish to experience? The historical crime has been exposed, the motive has been understood, and now the true principle of the lost legacy has been revealed. We stand at the threshold between knowledge and gnosis, between understanding the theory and engaging in the practice. To know that this prayer is a declaration is one thing. To learn how to make that declaration with every fiber of your being is another. The words, while secondary to the intent, are still the vessel. The internal posture, the vibrational frequency, the sequence of conscious alignment, these are the components of this sacred technology. The secret is not just what it is, but how it is done. The journey has brought us to the very door of the temple. The key is in our hand. Are you prepared to learn the 3 sacred stages of this divine activation and turn that key? The journey through the shadows of history has led us here to the very heart of the mystery. We have walked through forgotten libraries and stood in the silent ruins of an empire that chose control over truth. We have seen the evidence of a great spiritual crime, a legacy of light that was intentionally buried in the dark earth. But this journey was never just about uncovering a lost prayer. It was about recovering a lost part of ourselves. The final veil does not just lift, it dissolves into light, revealing a truth so simple and so profound, it has the power to shatter the foundations of fear upon which our world has been built. The greatest secret of the fourth prayer is this: it is not a message you send to God. It is the command you give to the God within you to awaken. For 2 millennia, the architects of control taught humanity to kneel. They built magnificent cathedrals to draw our gaze upward to a distant heaven, making us feel small and separate from the source of all life. They gave us prayers of supplication, beautiful words that nonetheless reinforced a narrative of unworthiness and lack. We were taught to ask, to beg, to hope for an intervention from a power outside of ourselves. This was the great forgetting. The initiator did not teach his inner circle to ask for light. He taught them how to become the light. The fourth prayer is not a plea for connection. It is the conscious and deliberate activation of a connection that has never been broken. It is the remembrance that the divine spark, the eternal monad, is not a gift to be earned, but the very essence of your being. This revelation transforms you from a subject in a kingdom to the sovereign of your own inner reality. So, how is this sacred technology applied? It is a threefold movement of consciousness, a silent and internal alchemy. First, you turn your gaze away from the heavens and into the quiet chamber of your own heart. In that stillness, you acknowledge the spark. You feel for the quiet, constant hum of eternity that exists beneath the noise of your thoughts. This is not an act of belief, but of perception. You are listening for a truth you already know. Second, you consciously dissolve the illusion of the separate self. You see the identity you call me, with its fears, its history, its limitations, as a temporary vessel, and you allow its walls to become transparent, letting the light of the monad shine through. In this moment, you are not praying to the source. You are realizing you are the source experiencing itself. And third, from this state of unified awareness, you make the declaration. This is not a request, but an alignment. You do not ask for peace. You embody the frequency of peace that is your origin. You do not ask for abundance. You align with the infinite abundance of the universe that flows through you. You do not ask for healing. You become the state of wholeness that was your design from the beginning. The words themselves are secondary to the feeling, the absolute knowing. It is the shift from the whisper of I hope to the silent, unshakable decree of I am. This is the forgotten legacy. The power to collapse the space between a desire and its manifestation by realizing there was never any space to begin with, only the illusion of separation. This ancient wisdom is more than a spiritual practice. It is a blueprint for a new way of living. It is the key to reclaiming your divine inheritance, not in some distant afterlife, but here and now. When you live from the knowing that the source of creation resides within you, the world ceases to be a place of threat and becomes a canvas for your consciousness. Fear loses its grip, for what can threaten a fragment of eternity? Lack becomes an impossibility, for how can a part of the infinite whole be incomplete? You cease to be a victim of circumstance and become the conscious author of your experience, understanding that the outer world is but a reflection of your inner state of being. This is the truth that was so feared, for a humanity that remembers its divinity cannot be controlled, cannot be enslaved, and cannot be made to forget its power ever again. We have arrived at the end of this telling, but it is the true beginning of your journey. The scrolls have been metaphorically opened, the hidden knowledge brought into the light. Now it lives within you, an activated memory waiting to be explored. This brings us to a final, profound question, a question that echoes from the past and shapes the future. Are we simply rediscovering a lost knowledge, or are we fulfilling an ancient prophecy, a collective awakening timed for this very moment in human history? Share your voice in the space below, for your insight is a part of this great unfolding. This knowledge was never meant to remain hidden. It is a birthright that belongs to all souls who are ready to remember. If this revelation has stirred the ancestral memory within you, help us carry this flame into the world. Subscribe to this channel and share this journey with those you know are searching for this deeper truth. Let us together create a resonance of awakening that can be felt across the planet. For the greatest revelation of all is that the change you wish to see in the world is not a battle to be won, but a frequency to be held. The kingdom you have been searching for is the one you will build, and its foundation has always been and will always be you.